pray that you've gone from whatever place you were in to a place of rest right now. And it's a place where He always wants us to be. It's not a victory without a battle, right? Some of you guys have been facing that. I feel it, but I also feel God's call to rest. He's calling you to rest. Rest in Him. Put trust in Him. Serve Him. Be the light on the hill. Don't think you're being the light on the hill and responding to things in your flesh. You got to respond to things in His rest. We're going to attempt something today. Lord, we just want to be attentive to your voice right now. We know your voice because we are your sheep. We belong to you. Help us to hear. Still pray in those people who are supposed to be here for this. We just quiet ourselves before you. We surrender if there's anything that's left, any fear that's on us, we can surrender it to you. In your presence, those things are all taken care of and put into right perspective. Tiredness, we surrender to you. Stress, we surrender to you. Fear, we surrender to you. Worry, anxiety, we surrender right now. All these things. We root out all those weeds, all those things that would want to choke out this word right now. And we just thank you that in the worship, our hearts have been tenderized. Those rocks have been removed, those boulders have been smashed. Right now we're just receptive to you. You know it's your Holy Spirit who teaches us. I just speak words of release. The Holy Spirit is the one who translates that to us. So come, Holy Spirit. Teach us now. In Jesus' name. We have an incredible King.
Amen.
We have such an incredible King who, because of His love for us, respects us. I don't know if you've ever thought of God respecting you, but He never forces Himself on you. He says, do this. Have you ever heard of a king who commands and then gives people the choice whether they obey or not? Think about it for a moment. Yeah, most of them, you go to jail if you don't obey the king. In the past, you'd be killed if you didn't obey the king. His word was law, and that was it. Our king, his word is law. But he only wants people who follow him, who've made the decision to follow him, that have never been forced or coerced. There's so much of the past church history that we need to apologize to the whole world about. At no point, it's so contrary to who our God is, for anybody to be forced or manipulated into anything. He's a king that says, obey me. But you can only obey me if you love me. I'm only interested in your obedience if you love me, is what it comes down to. I'm only interested in your obedience if you love me, and you can only obey me if you love me. In other words, the things that he asks us, his citizens, his followers to do, are impossible if your motivation for obedience is not love. Not what I'm preaching on. I just thought I'd give that to you. I thought I'd get the rabbit trails out of the way first. Look at this. I told Stephen he needed to be here today. Can you believe that Stephen actually had the audacity to badmouth God again yesterday? Again. Told Stephen he really needed to be here. He was badmouthing God because he was badmouthing himself. How we see Yahweh will determine how we see ourselves. And we've touched on this a little bit. How we see Yahweh will determine how we see ourselves. When we understand this whole thing, I started off with love and obedience. When you understand that he's a God of justice, and if you choose to be in the rebels' camp, well, there's a day coming where you will feel the justice of rebellion against the Creator. But you have that freedom to rebel if you want to rebel. If you want it so that your life here is all that matters to you, and you want to eat, drink, buy mansions, go on parties, if that's what you want to do, he's allowed for that. He has to. Because when you choose to love him, it's got to be knowing that you could choose to do that, but you've decided, you've chosen to do this. It's not that you've chosen not to do that. You've chosen him. It's not about what you didn't choose. It's about what you chose. That's what's important. You're not going to get a pat on the back because you didn't choose that. Right. Because the only way you can love him is because he loved you first. See, there's nothing to our credit. There is nothing to our credit whatsoever. He has done all that work and adopted us and brought us in, and there's nothing that we can say, I deserve it. We can't come before God and say, bless me because I deserve it. We come to our God and we seek because he is good. That's it. So understand that if he doesn't bless you because of all the things that you do, then he doesn't have an attitude of withholding his blessings because of the things that you do. Get this in your head. The reasons that you don't receive the blessings is because disobedience blocks it. It's not because he doesn't. You can't receive it in a position of disobedience. There's a difference. Because his love doesn't decrease or increase for you. It's you. You're in control. You are in control of what you receive and what you reject. That's why so much of the church, they come in and they worship God, but they refuse his blessings. Because they're in control. God doesn't work that way anymore. If you want to, that's how you want to live your life. If you want to deny 99% of the blessings that God has in store for you, I mean, that's your choice. I'm not going to stand here and argue with you. But you're wrong. You're wrong. So how you see Yahweh, do you see him as one? The reason that Jesus is with you is because he's keeping track of all your sins and all the things that you do wrong, and that you got to make sure at the end of every day that you think of everything that you could possibly have done wrong. A Job situation where he offered sacrifices just in case his children sinned. You know, that situation, and that's who your God is. A lot of people are trying to serve him that way. How you see him will determine how you see yourself. Love as I have loved you. If you don't see him as a God of love, then how are you going to love? If you don't see yourself as being loved, if you don't see him as loving, how can you see yourself as being loved? And if you don't see yourself as being loved, then how can you love? If you don't understand that he is forgiving, if you don't understand that, if you don't understand that he is forgiving, that you won't see yourself as forgiven, and you won't be able to forgive. I don't want to pound this thing to death. I want you to start. You've got to have a correct image of God. Lord, just get rid of the incorrect images. Just get rid of the incorrect images. Get rid of the incorrect images. How we see ourselves will determine how we respond to Yahweh. So how we see him is how we see ourselves, and how we see ourselves will determine how we respond to him. That's really important, because sometimes people look in the mirror and they see something that's not worth very much. And so when God calls to them, they don't respond. How can God use me? I can't do that. No, he can't be calling me into that. No, God would never do that. Have you read the Bible? God would never do that. God would never work that way. Oh, I'm sorry, but the Word says that God, because he is God, does whatever he wants. Don't tell God he doesn't work that way. That might come as a shock to him. We've gone over this. When I see and consider your heavens, the work of your fingers, the moon and the stars which you have established, what is man that you are mindful of him, and the son of earth-born man that you care for him? There is this thing that we carry around all this baggage, and when we stand, we talked about this on Friday, when we stand in the glory of his creation, forget about his glory, the glory of his creation, the majesty of his creation. We keep referring to the night sky, the starry sky. You can't see it in the city, but you know, I talked about the prairies. You stand it just overwhelms you. It's so big. And we're only seeing a tiny little, just a tiny microscopic dot of all that he's created. As we look up into the heavens, we see those stars, and you stand beside the Niagara Falls, or if you ever got a chance to go to Victoria Falls, I mean, it's just, there's so much in this world that will humble you. It will just humble you. See, my God created this and more. What am I? What am I? What is man? What is man that you're mindful of him? See, if God just remains as creator to you, then this is where you are. If that is all he is to you, is Lord, if that's all he is to you, if you worship the pre-Moses Lord, and all you know of him is the creator, you understand there is a progression that goes on, right? We talked about it.
Yeah.
Abraham, even though he's the father of our faith, he did not know the God that Moses knows.
Mm-hmm.
God only revealed himself in a certain way to Abraham. But to Moses, he revealed his name. He met with Moses face to face. But Moses didn't know the God that David knew. David was in a completely different realm. And can I tell you something? None of them know the God that you know.
Wow.
Because you don't walk with God. You don't meet with God face to face. You are possessed by Him. He abides in you. What is man that you are mindful of? What is man that you would inhabit him? What is man that you would I don't want to get ahead. If this is how we respond when we compare ourselves to the majesty of God's creation, how do we respond when we hear His voice? How do we respond when it's His glory that we're standing in? Because although His glory is reflected in all of creation, we have the privilege of experiencing at least part of the real thing. We can't experience it all. We've talked about that. That this flesh can't be in that kind of atmosphere. But our spirit experiences His glory. Oh, the wonder of it all. The wonder of it all. Moses heard His voice. I am the God of your father, Abraham's God, Isaac's God, Jacob's God. Moses' reaction? Come, in fairness now, they haven't heard God's voice for a very long time. A very, very long time. Joseph had a lot of encounters with God. It was really the last one. So for 440 years, or a bit longer, God was silent. And then suddenly He shows up, not in the midst of Israel, as in the people, but out in the desert, in a bush, to a shepherd. Isn't it amazing how God keeps revealing Himself? Wow, to those who are, I guess you would say, poor in spirit. Never really considered labeling Moses with that, but when you consider what condition he was in and what he was doing out there, God reveals Himself. Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. Now, along with revealing who He is, what happens when the creator of all things calls you to His side? He says, I've got a job for you. I have an assignment. This is what I'm doing, and you're going to be part of it. Now, you might be used to that because we've talked about that. You've experienced it. You've been there in part at times. You've heard that. But if you stop and actually reflect on that and consider that for a moment, and what if that voice calls you to a side? Now, the Israelites' cries of injustice have reached me. I've seen just how much the Egyptians have oppressed them. So get going. I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. Okay, Moses didn't have a lot of preparation time for this. Just moments ago, he was nothing more than a shepherd boy for his father-in-law. That's all he is. Forget that he was raised a prince. He is out in the desert, a shepherd, looking after not even his own flock, but after his father-in-law's. Those sheep might belong to him by marriage. It's not even a David situation. At least David, it was his father's sheep, so what is his father's is really an extension, belongs to him. In this case, it's his father-in-law's sheep that he's looking at in the desert. Don't consider that Moses is some great man here. He's hiding. Now just look at this. But Moses said to God, who am I? Who am I? Why me? Why are you picking on me? Why are you asking me? Why are you sending me? I'm nothing. I'm nothing. Okay, now, please bring in what I was saying at the beginning. When we look in the mirror, who am I, Lord? I'm nothing. I'm just an old retired person. Who am I? I'm nothing. I have nothing to bring to the table. I'm not worth anything. I'm nothing. Who am I? Who am I to go to Pharaoh? Suddenly God tells you to go and give a message to the Prime Minister of Canada. Okay, but it's worse than that, because the Pharaoh was much more powerful than the Prime Minister. And there were some things that Moses really didn't want to go and see Pharaoh about. He really didn't. He was going back to his shame. Think about that for a second. Imagine you did something 40 years ago. You did something 40 years ago, and God has come to you and has told you have to go to a person that you don't feel that you are in a position of life to even approach, but it's also an embarrassing situation because of something you did 40 years ago. How many of you would just say no? How many of you would hide your face? How many of you would just walk away and say, you're crazy? No, I'm hearing wrong. I need 2 other confirmations, please. I'm going to lay down a few fleeces here. And I can manipulate those.
Yeah.
Who am I? See, it's a natural response if you understand God and you understand the calling. It's natural, because who are we? It's natural to respond that way because we have a few tendencies that we have to take care of. What is man that you are mindful of him? The son of earth-born man that you care for him. Who am I? We really have nothing to offer. And don't tell me that he shows his strength through weakness, because that's a load for a lot of you. You'll say it. You'll say it. But it doesn't mean you're actually going to live it. Because you look in the mirror and say, who am I? You look in the mirror and you size up your strengths and your weaknesses. And you decide your obedience according to that, whether you think you can do it or not. You do a self-evaluation, can I do this? Before you decide whether you're going to be obedient or not. So don't be quoting Paul to me. Because most of us aren't at the maturity of Paul. And although his words are very true, and it's what Jesus spoke to him, it's what Jesus revealed to him, it's a revelation that Jesus gave to him, most of us do not know the revelation, we only know the words. Because we have a problem at this level, let alone Paul's level. See, our hang-up is this. We measure our worth by our strengths and our weaknesses. We decide whether we're worthy. We decide. It's us. We evaluate what we can do and what we can't do. We draw the line in the sand. We say, Lord, all my life is yours. And then when he actually acts on what you've pledged. That's when you come up with the addendums, those little clauses that you add in there. Just don't send me to my family. Don't send me to such and such a town. Don't send me to this person. And they're all situations that make you uncomfortable. There's nobody more uncomfortable than Moses in this situation right now. But see, Father isn't concerned about our strengths and weaknesses. He's not. Because his response to Moses is the response that he has with us. In fact, do a little research and you'll find out it's his response to a lot of people. I will certainly be with you. Moses gave his excuses. Who am I, he says. And God just totally ignored that and stated, I will be with you. See, people say that God chose Moses because he was raised in Pharaoh's house. He chose Moses from birth. He may have arranged a few things, but Moses' qualifications was not because he was raised in Pharaoh's house. They say it was because he had knowledge of the desert. Really? Is that why he asked his father-in-law to stay with him? Because his father-in-law could show them the best places to camp and how to travel through the desert? Moses maybe knew how to look after sheep, but he did not gain experience living in the desert. He needed his father-in-law for that. Moses, people say, well, he was a good spokesman, but Moses says, hey, man, my tongue is thick. I can't speak. It's not an excuse. I created you. And Moses still went on about it. Fine, I'll get your brother to speak for you. See, there's no getting away. Ever encounter that with a parent? You give all kinds of excuses to your parent, and your mom or your dad always had an answer for you? I get accused that a lot when people say things to me, and I respond to them and say, you got an answer for everything. Well, is that a bad thing? God has an answer for everything. For every excuse, for everything that we're going to put up. Again, I don't want to get ahead of this. I will certainly be with you. If you research that, you're going to find in every rough situation, and everything that God called people into, every situation, he always said, I am with you. Look it up. I am with you. Prophets are in a tough place. I am with you. The king is in a tough place. I am with you. He asks the impossible. I am with you. Come on, Moses, a shepherd guy, is going to go into Pharaoh's presence and say, let my people go. It's not like he's got this huge army behind him. It's him and his brother and a staff. But he's got the God of glory. He's there representing the God of glory. He isn't asking on his own behalf. He's standing in a position of obedience, and at some point that has to sink into our head. I am not in a weak position here. I may look weak to you, but I'm not here on my own. I've been sent. There's a difference. It's sent. Some of you think that you chose to be where you are. Little do you know you were sent. Ask these people about this situation. Ask them. Ask them how they responded. Ask them whether they evaluated their strengths and their weaknesses. Moses, we already know. Moses is a murderer and a coward. Moses is a murderer and a coward. See, the reason I know that God chose him from the very beginning is because it was already on his heart, and there was a heart response. He did not want to see his people being abused. People say he didn't know that he was a Hebrew. He knew he was a Hebrew. He went out and walked with it. He went out to visit his people, and he saw them being abused, and it hurt him, and he wanted to help them. But it was an incorrect response. It was sin. He murdered a man. And then when he realized he couldn't get away with it, he ran away. This is the man now that God was saying to him, go, present yourself to Pharaoh, and tell him, let my people go. Gideon. We all know about Gideon. See, remember, Moses was born to a slave. He was born in really an impoverished situation, but he was allowed to be raised as a prince. But he returned to that situation almost. He had freedom because it was away from Egypt. But the shepherds, it's not like they were oil barons or anything. You consider Gideon. Gideon, he said, listen, I'm the least of my family. My family is the least of our tribe. And our tribe is the least of the nation. What's he saying? Who am I? Almighty warrior. Shh. Saul. Wasn't that Saul's reaction as well? My family's nothing. I don't come from a famous, well-to-do family. My family's nothing. Who am I? David, the youngest in the family, relegated to being a shepherd. But it's funny. You don't hear from David, who am I? Maybe privately to the Lord. But did he reject the anointing?
No.
Did he ever question it?
No.
His brothers were jealous of it. But David never questioned it. Because he had already learned, I am with you. I am with you. What about Elijah or Elisha? Who were they? I mean, Elisha. He was a farmer. He was a farmer. He wasn't a prince. He wasn't one of these scholars, or he was nothing at all. He's just a farmer. And yet he got a double portion of what Elijah had. He asked. Matthew? I mean, come on. I pick on Matthew because Matthew's, as far as all the Israelites are concerned, Matthew was a traitor. Matthew's a tax collector. He's worse than a sinner. He's worse than a prostitute. He prostituted himself to the Romans. He was a traitor. He was taking money from his people. Jesus called him. Peter, well, we know about Peter. He was a fisherman. What? Did these guys actually have anything to offer? They did nothing to offer. Did Peter have anything to offer Jesus? Except trouble? Nothing to offer. What about John the Baptist? What did he say? I am not worthy. I'm not worthy to tie his sandal. I'm not worthy. But yet, what was John called to? He was called to baptize the one who would baptize by fire. And John, in such a humble state, said, Lord, You asked me to baptize you, but it's your baptism I need. I need your baptism. Who am I? Who am I to baptize you? And this is the man who the nation came to repent. Yet he stood in the Master's presence. And he was left feeling, who am I? Bill Johnson says, when you're willing to do what you're unqualified to do, that's what qualifies you. It's not about your strengths. It's not about your weaknesses. It's everything to do with God is with us. He's the enabler. There's nothing we have to offer him. Nothing. But because we're willing. That's our offering. Our willingness. Our obedience. Do you understand that? That's what's so valuable. Because then what we're saying is, I'm willing to hang out with you. Dad, I'm willing to hang out with you. Dad, show me what you're doing. Call me there. That's where I want to be. In all your ways, acknowledge him. Right, Kevin?
Yes.
In all your ways, acknowledge him.
Right,
Kevin and I were talking about this yesterday. Grocery shopping. Have you ever done this? The more Kevin and I talked together yesterday, the more revelation we got on stuff. It was just incredible. The things that we were receiving yesterday as we discussed Scripture together. Have you ever done this? Have you ever walked into a grocery store, just what you do routinely, and say, in all your ways I acknowledge you, Lord. Show me what you're doing. Call me to you. You think you're on an errand, but you're on his errand. Every place you go to, you're on his errand. But we compartmentalize. We have our daily routine stuff that we do. We just have to do it. But in every situation, everything we go into, we need to pray that, don't we, Kevin? Lord, open my eyes.
Of always being used.
Show me what you're doing.
Yeah, that's true. Where we are.
Suddenly, you're going to see somebody who's in a situation. You're not to approach them, but you're to intercede for them. But there's another person that you're going to need to approach because they actually need help. What did I say last night when we were talking about this? There's two responses. There's
Introduction.
No, intercession or intervention. That's what we're called to most of the time. Intercession or intervention. I said I had to write that down because I like that so much. Yes, that's a good one. Let me write that down. I love revelations that other people have and those catchphrases they have, but when they start coming into me, yes, thank you, Lord. Yeah. So we walk into a situation, into Walmart, into whatever store, into a family gathering. Lord, show me what you're doing. And call me to your side. He loves that. He loves when his children want to be with him, when his children want to be involved with what he's doing. That's what he's called us to. And then he starts seeing that maturity in us. He sees that maturity in us. We're not saying, well, you know, I can't be used in this situation because I don't speak French or I don't like people very much and, you know, I don't know what to say. It's not that at all. Lord, I'm willing. And you step into the situation. That's it. I'm willing. And you step into the situation. He gives you the words. He gives you things to say. You know exactly what to do. How'd you know I needed that? And Kevin and I were talking. In our case, it'd probably be getting things off of top shelves for people most of the time. Yeah, we do a lot of intervention. Yeah, or you walk in and you just see somebody standing there. Did you need something off of here? How did you know? I serve a great God. Here you go.
Yeah.
It might sound silly to a lot of people, but those little things, you don't know if that person was standing there saying, "Lord, I need help." And you are the answer to their cry. Is there a better place to be than to be God's answer to somebody's prayer? Wow. Lord, just let me see. So it's your you might feel unqualified, but it's your willingness that qualifies. Let that get into your head. You might feel you are in a situation of who am I? You might feel unqualified. I'm too old. I don't know enough. I don't speak French. This and that. Just listen. God's love transcends all language. Transcends all age. Listen. If you're 80 years old, he's not going to tell you to go out and play hopscotch with a child. Okay? Maybe. He could. But in most cases, he sends you to the people that you are uniquely qualified for him to use. Karen? I'm getting ahead of myself. So what is our identity? Yeah, is it what we have to offer? Is that what we identify with? This is a place where you need to take inventory right now. What is it? Do you identify because you're tall? Do you identify that you're short? Do you identify that you're a great singer? Do you identify because you're great at bookkeeping? Do you identify because you're this or that or blah blah blah? What is your? Is it what you have to offer? Is it your strengths? Or maybe you're one of those negative people. You don't see any value in yourself, and you only see the limits. You only see the weaknesses. Maybe it's where you're from. It's where you're from. Maybe you think you're limited that way because of where you're from. I'm not from here. Some of us are not from here, from further away than others. But
far away here.
But at least you're the same continent.
Yeah, but see, there's same country, same continent, same planet.
Same planet, yeah.
I'm not from here, and this is the only place in Canada I was afraid of. This is the only place that I would ever say to God, don't send me there. This is the place that caused me to become a great believer in multiplication in the kingdom. Because I would fill up the gas tank and I would pray that God would multiply that gasoline as I traveled so I would not have to stop in Quebec. No, you got to understand, that's the level of my fear. I would come out of Montreal with fear and trembling. I almost preferred to fly to totally avoid. Where am I? It's not because God has a sense of humor. He does. That's not the reason I'm here. We're going to get to it, but it's because I'm uniquely qualified to reach a certain type of person. That's why I'm here. It just happens to be in the place of my greatest fear.
God, and it's probably what the enemy was using to try and get you away from your calling.
Shout out to my grade 9 French teacher. Now you gotta understand, okay? You gotta understand. I was the kid who was elected to read the passage in French all the time because they got the biggest laugh from me. It might have been awful, but for them it was great fun.
Yeah.
Because I do not have a gift. I'm sorry, that's not one of my gifts. I do not have a gift for language. And yet, where am I? What am I doing? Now, you would identify, instead of where you come from, who you belong to. I'm with you. Who you belong to. who has given us life, joy, peace, and power, who abides in us and in whom we abide. Who I am becomes whose I am. I like that one. I don't know if that's an original. I'm sure somebody somewhere has said something in life, but it's new for me. Who I am becomes whose I am. Whose I am.
Sounds wrong.
Who you belong to. Whose I am.
Sounds like
You're not a person from Whoville. It's whose I am. I'm a whose I am. I'm not a who am I. I'm a whose I am.
Who's I am? Yeah, that's
dark.
Whose are I?
Who's
But let it sink in. Let it sink in there for a second. Okay, let it sink in. Because I know some of you are fighting it right now. I can see you fighting it. You're trying to receive this. But you've got so many walls built up, so many moats dug, so many hiding places that you've arranged, so that if he calls you, you got a place to escape to. And he wants to remove all that. Because he loves you. And he's with you. And he just wants to be with you. And he, it's not that he says, go and invest, go and do well. He says, go and I'm with you. Go and I'm with you. See, it's his work. He's saying, look, I'm working there. Go there. I'm there. Come with me. Come be with me. Come be involved in what I'm doing. Don't hide in your cave. Don't hide in your cave where I have to show up and say, what are you doing here? I'm not working in this cave. I'm not planting crops in this cave. I don't have fruit trees here in this cave. None of my people have set up shop here in this cave. I'm not in this cave. What are you doing here? It wasn't a polite question he was asking Elijah. It actually was a question of accusation. What are you doing here? I had a wonderful word for Kevin yesterday. I was praying for him. The Lord actually allowed me to see him forming Kevin in his mother's womb yesterday. That was a privilege. That's the word I received. And what he said was this: I don't make mistakes. And then he showed me again that starry night. He showed me that starry night, and he said, he's greater than this. He's greater than this. Isn't that an encouraging word? Father does not make mistakes. He knit you together in your mother's womb. He did that. That was him. He knit you together in your mother's womb. He gave you your personality. He gave you your intelligence. He gave you your heart. He gave you everything that is you. He knit there, and it's been revealed as you've gone on. And he still, I don't care if you're 86 or 93 or 105, he still has more to reveal of what he's put in you than what you've yet received. He gives us these wonderful revelations of ourselves. He's knit us with purpose, his purpose. See, Moses was not a mistake. Moses' birth wasn't a chance happening. It wasn't a mistake. He was born at the time where his birth was his death sentence. His birth was his death sentence. What a time to be born. I always laugh because maybe I shouldn't say it because it's dangerous times we live in. But there were times of growing up that I didn't want to be a guy, because I looked at who gets killed on the path.
Guys.
And at that time, who made up the military?
Men.
Who got killed?
And
Soldiers.
Soldiers.
And I looked through history, and it was always the guy. I always, also when I was a kid, asked never to be a king, because all I ever saw was leaders being assassinated. Seems to be no end of it. Yeah, you read through you read through the Bible, and what do you see? In Israel, the kingdom of Israel, not so much Judah, but Israel, those guys just kept getting assassinated. Yeah, it's like, oh Lord, if only I wasn't a man, and I definitely don't want to be a king. Like you're horse. There was a time when it was dangerous to be a man.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord, women fought for the privilege to die just as equally as men. Amen?
Amen. Yes. Yes.
Moses was not a mistake, but he lived in dangerous times. He was not saved by chance. It wasn't a chance thing. It had all been divinely arranged. Because in his mother womb, God had actually knit into him this heart, this thing that would want to see his people free. He knit that purpose into him. There was nobody else rising up. There was nobody else who was walking out defending other Israelites. It was only Moses who did that in his flesh. It was only Moses who stepped out and defended another Israelite. It was only Moses because it was knit into him. Do you understand that there are people in this world who are doing things in their flesh that would be multiplied 1,000,000 times over if they did it under the lordship of Jesus Christ? Because it was knit into them. They just not plugged into the power source. No, not talents. Purpose. Purpose. Okay. We have to be very careful with talents. Although we can honor God with our talents, it's seldom that He actually calls us in those things. And when He does call us in those talents, under His lordship, they're much greater than you could ever imagine. Some of these musicians, it's when they started coming into that place of worship that whatever they did just magnified. We were commenting on Christine DeMarco. You probably don't know all the different worshipers, psalmists that we see up here, and you don't need to. But there's one who, when she started off, a good singer, but very reserved. Didn't seem a lot of it. Wasn't one of those who really stood out. But he gives us, on-the-job training. He doesn't train us on the side and then bring us in. He brings us in and trains us as we go. And the more she operates in this thing, man, the more it's multiplied. The more it's multiplied. So when you look at one of the first videos of her and you compare it to the latest, you wouldn't know it's the same person. And the glory of the Lord that comes through that worship is just, and she's one of these people now that dances all over the stage and is doing somersaults and just lost in it, and you hear her voice crack because she's just lost in it. It's not performance. It's not about singing. She's worshiping. Now she's just let loose. It just doesn't apply to worshipers. It applies to everybody who's been called by the Lord, moved into a position. The longer you operate in that thing, the more there's an anointing that comes out of it. The more freedom that you just start letting loose. You lose your reservations in this thing, and there's a confidence and a boldness that is coming out. And that's how it works. So when you look at Moses, how he started off, I mean, the first time he goes into Pharaoh, he didn't overwhelm Pharaoh. But the more he operated in that anointing and that calling, the bolder that anointing became. The more there was. To the point that when they actually got free and were out in the desert, Moses never even questioned meeting God face to face. This is Moses who hid his face when he heard the voice of God. And now he gets to stand in his presence. He gets to talk to him audibly. Talk to him. Representing the people and then representing God to the people. Because the people were too afraid to represent themselves before God. So if you start off with something with some timidity, just keep going. The boldness is coming. It's coming. Moses was born with purpose. You were born with purpose. Maybe you don't quite understand your purpose yet. Some of you do, and you're operating in that. Some of you have not yet understood that purpose and that unique thing that he's called you into. But he wants you to know. Look at this in Exodus 2. So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And God looked upon the children of Israel, and God acknowledged them. God acknowledged them. He acknowledged their pain. He acknowledged their hurt. He acknowledged their crying out. He acknowledged their need. Their need. And then the very next chapter, now Moses, he acknowledged them. Now Moses, you see the link? He acknowledged them, and then what's the next thing we see? Moses being commissioned. Moses being sent. It's like, okay, now is the time. Where did I put Moses? Or where's that lad hiding? And he meets with Moses. I wonder if Moses ever looked back on the day and had a chuckle. What his response was. A couple of times that I acknowledged my calling was probably the times that I was furthest from the Lord. Weird, eh? It was an argument with my mom. She was upset with the direction of my life. And she's yelling at me. Mom's not the tallest. She's fierce. Right in my face. What are you doing? What are you going to do with your life? I'm a pastor. What? Shocks my mom. She goes off in tears. And I'm just, what? Huh? I got to find something to do. Another time, I was in the militia. Part-time soldier. But I was a musician. I played in a band in Nova Scotia. We had to play for all their big events and officers' parties and stuff. And I got into stuff that no lad should get into. And I was out walking with a buddy. He was talking about his future, what he was going to do. And he said, what are you going to do with your life? So actually, I think I'm going to be a pastor. What? You? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah. Your humor is improving. Yeah. Couldn't get any further away. It was knit into me. It was a Moses situation. He didn't know how to respond because it wasn't ignited yet. The calling was there, but I wasn't in a position for it to be ignited yet. But yet, I still recognized it. And even now, I look at it and laugh, but to me, it still seems bizarre. So as I said, Moses was a murderer and a coward. God chose him because he loved him. He didn't look at his weaknesses. He didn't look at his deficits. He didn't look at his strengths. He didn't look at his education. He didn't look at his desert knowledge. He didn't look at those things. He didn't look that he was a coward. He didn't look that he was a murderer. He didn't look that he was hiding. He didn't look at these things. He looked at this man. I love him. I want to spend more time with him. I want to spend more time with him. God chose him because he loved him and he knew he was key to touching Israel. Isn't that amazing? Think about that for a second. Moses was chosen because God knew that he was key. He was key to touching Israel. He wanted to free Israel. He had put this purpose in Moses, but more than that, Moses was in a place where he was key. He was essential for touching Israel. So when God calls you, it is because he loves you, first of all. When he calls you to a situation, when he calls you to something, it's because he loves you. Not because of anything you have to offer. It's because he loves you. Simple as that. He loves you. And in calling you, he gets to spend more time with you. Because you aren't qualified for this, you are going to be absolutely dependent on him, which means that you're going to be spending more time with him, and he just loves that. That's a good thing. And some of you know, when you get into situations where you have no power, no insight, when it's all looking pretty bleak, you're desperate to spend time with Dad. He loves you, but also because he knows you are key to reaching the people he sends you to. You're uniquely positioned. The one who comes to mind right now, right away, as soon as I was considering this, is Karen. There was something about the people in that building.
Yeah.
She was uniquely qualified to bring God into that situation. There were people there who were being abused. It wasn't because of Karen's ability. It was because she brought the king into that situation. She brought the king into that situation. And there were some things that Karen had to experience. There were some stumbles, just like Moses. Moses made mistakes. But you know what? The aroma in that building has changed. There's people who feel safe now. Mouths have been shut. People in the building are beginning to enjoy spending time together. I could have gone into there and everybody would have stayed hidden. I was not uniquely positioned to go into that situation and bring Christ into it. Karen was. So if you're if you're looking where you are right now and you're scratching your head and thinking, how did I get here? How did I get to Montreal? How did I get to Quebec? It's because there's people that he's called you to that you are uniquely positioned for him to touch them through you. It's not because you're qualified. It's because he's with you. He's with you. Come on, that's gotta shake. Come on, it's gotta shake some stuff up in your life. It's gotta bring some joy in. Oh yes, Lord, I felt like I was being flushed down the toilet in this situation, but you're with me.
Wow.
You're with me. It means something's happening here. This means that there's people being touched because of this. You brought me into this situation because there's people that only I can touch, that you will work through me and touch them. uniquely positioned. He's not stupid, you know. He maximizes. He maximizes. Look at this. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel. David knew. David probably, we're so used to the stories. We're so used to the history. Some are seeing it maybe for the second time, and you look at it, and the steps that David took is how not to become a king. You don't become a king by avoiding fights. Saul put himself into a situation to be assassinated, and David walked away. You don't become a king that way. David went to live with the enemy. You don't become a king that way. So, because, and this, he became the king of Judah, but not the king of Israel for 7 years. And although his people warred against the other people, you'll notice that David could have said an assassin. If he went full out war, because there was only these little skirmishes, if he had gone to full out war, he would have won. But it was by attrition. He waited until the Lord had. What we're told in the Word is that David's camp increased and the family of Saul's camp decreased. Even though they had more resources, they had more people, they had more of everything, but David was the anointed. So David looks at this and he knew that the Lord had a step. Come on now. When you know you're in a position because that's where the Lord placed you, there's a boldness that's involved in that. There's an encouragement no matter what you face. I'm here because God put me here. He's going to give me the wisdom for this. He's going to give me all that I need for this. So David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and that he had exalted his kingdom for the sake of his people Israel. It's God that increased Israel. It's God. It's him. He is doing this. Israel had done everything wrong. They had made all the mistakes. There should have been no increase in Israel. But yet God was exalted. He was increasing them, putting them above their enemies. God blessed Israel through David. God blessed Israel through David. David was king and Israel was increased. David was king and Israel was increased. David was uniquely positioned to touch Israel. David was uniquely positioned for God to touch David, for David to touch Israel with the touch of God. If you want to put it that way, he was anointed to anoint, passing it on. He received favor to pass on favor. That's the position we're in. We receive blessing, pass on blessing. We understand that part. We receive blessing to pass on blessing because we consider blessing material stuff, right? I receive money so I can pass on money. But you receive favor, pass on favor to those that you are uniquely positioned to touch. He chose David because he liked being with David. We all accept that with David, right? But he also enjoyed being with Saul. But Saul blew it. See, we continue in this relationship in a position of obedience. The favor and the blessings and everything flow when we're in a position of obedience. When we submit ourselves. When we say, yes, Lord. When we take those steps. When we do what He's asking us to do. When we work with Him. When we're coming alongside of Him. And there's such joy. But you know, everything screeches to a halt in a family when a child steps into disobedience. The flow, it interrupts. It's not, the parents want the obedience of the child, not just for the sake of the child, but for the sake of the family. When everybody does what they need to do, there is a flow and a pleasure in that family, isn't there? The work is not too much for one person. Right? Everybody does their part. No complaints. It's what it's like in the kingdom. The kingdom needs to flow. It needs to flow. Every part needs to do its part. Every member needs to fulfill their calling, to do what they're doing. No complaints, no fighting. Just flow in the Spirit. Keep in step with the Spirit. That's what the Word says. Keep in step with the Spirit. Just keep going with the Spirit. Just keep in step. Keep in harmony with God. Keep in that position of obedience. And it's more for the people that you're ministering to, the people that you're involved with, than even for yourself. Chose David because he liked being with David and because he knew David was uniquely positioned because of the cry of the people, and he could bless Israel through David. The people were crying out for a proper king. They wanted a mighty nation, and David was the answer to that cry. When they were in Egypt, the people were crying out. They wanted to be freed. They wanted to be freed from their suffering, and Moses was the answer to that cry. So who's crying out that God is sending you in? Might be one person. Here we see later on when David has become king, on the 8th day he sent the people away, and they blessed the king and went to their tents, joyful and glad of heart for all the good that the Lord had done for his servant David and for Israel, his people. See, there's the whole thing that we see. It was a big celebration, and people went away so happy that David was king, because they saw the Lord's blessing upon the king, and they saw that blessing being translated into the nation of Israel. That's who you are, people. That's how he does this thing. That's who we are. Why you? Well, why not? I was going to say. Why you? It's not because of anything you have to offer. It's not because you're good looking, although you were all that. It's not because you're talented, although you were all that. It's not because you're wealthy, although you were all that. Just waiting for you to look at it. It's not anything you have to offer. You've got nothing to offer. But he doesn't look down on you because you have nothing to offer. He doesn't think little of you because you have nothing to offer. He's not looking for anything from you. He doesn't need anything from you. Because he loves you and he enjoys hanging out with you. That's why you. Why me, Lord? Because I love you and I just love spending time with you. I don't know. Can you let that sink in? Can you get that? Can you get the fact that you were created for fellowship with God? You were created to hear His voice. You were created to walk with Him. You were created so that He could just enjoy you. So He could just enjoy you. Is that such a foreign concept for us? See, in the preparation of this word, I can't tell you I guess if anybody had shown up last night, I would have been really embarrassed. Maybe not. But I got lost in worship. I got overwhelmed by the truth of this, that Dad just wants to spend, and we spent quality time together last night. So lost in worship. I was like Tiger, just bouncing around.
Yeah.
I just. And it's great in worship, but it also translates in service. And because you are unique. Why you? Because you are uniquely positioned to touch the lives of the people who are calling out to Him, to whom He is sending. So there's no retirement, ladies. There's no retirement. There's no retirement in the kingdom. There's none at all. It doesn't matter your age. When your mission's over, He's taking you home. It's as simple as that. So as long as you're here and you've got air in your lungs, He's got purpose for you. And He's got people who are crying out that He's moving you into that situation because you are uniquely qualified. You are uniquely positioned for Him to allow His favor to flow through you and into them. I'm not here for everybody in Quebec. But there are people who respond to me. You know the experience. Not everybody you meet do you want to hang out with, but there are some people that you meet and you think, man, I could be friends with them. There's just there's something that connects. With Moses, it was an entire nation. But in saying that, they weren't the greatest of friends because they were a bunch of complainers. But it's still, he was able, the connection was there, that God was able to, that flow was there. I mean, Aaron couldn't do that. Miriam couldn't do that. That was Moses. That was Moses that was uniquely positioned. And remember, it's not a comfortable place. Being brought into that position does not mean it's going to be comfortable for you, because he will call us into a position of suffering, but it's not a suffering that is overwhelming suffering. And there's a joy in that suffering. It's just like Jesus. He went to the cross for the joy that was set before Him. Sometimes He has us walk through things, and it's ooh, ow, ooh, but it's not about us, where He's having us go through that because He is pouring His favor through us and into those people, and it's an uncomfortable position. Moses, it was not comfortable for Moses. He put up with a lot, Moses did. David went through a lot so that God could bless Israel through him. So don't think it's going to be all peaches and butterflies and daffodils and sunny days. But it's always going to be joy, and it's always going to be peace, and it's always going to be the presence of the Lord. And who could ask for anything more? Really? Isn't that everything we could ask for? Peace, joy, and the presence. I will certainly be with you, he said to Moses. Plus, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And it's a good word study. Look it up. I am with you. And see the situations he spoke into, and the encouragement that he gave to those who were going through really, really horrendous things. And that alone, I am with you. With Joshua, it's, have I not commanded you? It's the same thing. I am with you. I am with you. Have I not commanded you? Is it not me who's sending you? Is it not me? Is it not me saying this? There's a reason why it says in the Word that whatever you do, do it as unto the Lord. Because we don't always realize it, but God has arranged things for us to be exactly where He wants us to be. Sometimes we think it's our choosing to be there, but He's made arrangements for us. Just as He gave Moses' mother the wisdom to put him in a basket and put him among the reeds, just as He arranged for Pharaoh's daughter to be at the water at that time, just as He put it upon Pharaoh's or on Moses' sister's heart to go and offer her mother as the nursemaid.
Oh,
Yeah, all beautifully arranged. It's what He does. Don't look at the things in your life and think what a waste or blah blah. Unless it's you who's completely wrestle control from Him. But even then, it says that He doesn't let anything go to waste. He uses everything for our benefit. Why is He using it for our benefit? So that we can be uniquely positioned to allow favor to flow into the people He's called us to. I say, forgive me if I have not delivered this well, but this should be shaken of your life. This should be a huge encouragement for you. This should be a thing of power and of enabling. This should be a thing where you wake up tomorrow morning glad to go wherever you have to go to, knowing He is with you. If He's with you, then you can do all things. If He's with you, it's not just a matter of, oh yeah, I guess I can survive this day. Yes, I think I can squeeze it. I mean, triumphant. With great success and great blessings in all your relationships. We're going to go back to worship here. Because there's an anthem I want us to sing. I want us to sing this anthem. We need to sing this anthem. It's a declaration. It is a declaration that you belong to Him. It is a declaration. We got to declare this.
Can I just say something?
Yeah.
Yesterday when I was going downtown, and I started singing, and I was just singing, "Who am I? Who am I? Who am I, God?" Until I reached where I was going. So when I parked, I came out of the car. I saw the guy coming out from the building, but it locks because they have a security guard. So he takes out the garbage from all the place. So until he comes back. So this guy he went with a bag. I think he was traveling. So I was supposed to be there to wait until the man comes so that he opens. But just like 2 minutes, the guy came back. He had forgotten something in the building. So he opened, and then I went in. So as I was entering the elevator, there was this lady, well dressed, gorgeous. No, everyone on that building, they are the well-off people, I should say.
Yeah.
And then, I didn't say anything to her. I just smiled. That's it. Then she said to me, "Oh, you are so sweet."
Oh.
I said, in myself now, I was just, having that to say, you know what, that's my God. That is my God. And I had this overwhelming just in the car when I was going. I could just feel the presence of God. And I said, wow, this is just a confirmation, and I'm coming here. This is the message. So I'm just getting like a double portion right now.
I don't know if it was actually how she looked, but somewhere when you said that, I had this image of this woman with one of those like silk jacket, kind of like a padded, the padded thing with the big hat, and like a silk blouse, and like a thin, like a really real.